I just like to make a disclaimer before we get to the actual video. Evangelion in general, and Sayle in particular, is riddled with plot holes, things that just don't really make much sense, contradictory information, and an unclear canon. So, what I'm going to be saying a lot during this is things like, well, the possibilities are, or it could be, or just a lot of this is going to be me listing plausible explanations for things. Also, if I'm giving my opinion as to what I think it is, I will be stating that. I just like to say my opinion is not necessarily the right one, nor the one most supported by evidence. It's what I think makes the most sense and what makes the most parsimonious narrative. So that being said, let's get into Sayle. So Sayle is, of course, from Neon Genesis Evangelion and serves as possibly the main antagonist of the series, depending on if you think the angels are, Sayle is, Gendo is, or some combination of the above. Whether they're villains or antagonists really depends upon whether or not you believe that their goals are justified or meaningful. Let me just try to even get into this. So, within the context of Evangelion, Sayle is a small group of men who seem to control the entirety of the world. The UN is more or less implied to be their puppet and does whatever they say. There's a larger community of, committee of, I believe, 12 members, and then there's the inner circle of the Human Instrumentality Committee, which is composed of 4 members from the great powers of one from each of the great powers of the world, led by Chairman Keel, who appears to be some sort of cyborg. The other members of Sayle don't really look like real people anyways, and are these strange colored caricatures. So, like I said, we aren't really sure who or what they are exactly. Keel seems to be the only one that we have confirmation that he actually looks what his avatar is. Whether the rest of them are computers, real people, if they're like Keel and they're cyborgs, maybe they're hooked up to life support and it's only their brains interacting with the computer, we have no real idea. After their first couple appearances, though, they tend to appear as giant monoliths with a number on them and a caption that says "sound only." So all we really know about them is they're an Illuminati-esque organization with secret motives that controls the Earth. Nerve is implied to be, well, it's not implied, it's stated to be directly funded by them, and as evidenced in the end of Evangelion, the Japanese armed forces and indeed the global armed forces are under their direct control. So before we get into motivations, let's go back and try to figure out where Sayle came from. So Sayle claims that they've always existed or they come from ancient times. Now what this means is completely open for interpretation. You can take it up at surface level that they're an ancient group of elites who have governed the earth since ancient times. Like, they've manipulated wars throughout the ages. They've just always been there. They're kind of like the League of Shadows or something to that effect. So it can mean that. It can mean that their belief system goes back to ancient times. They obviously take Judeo-Christian elements, and I use that term unironically. They take elements of Judaism and Christianity, in particular millenarianism, and the reliance on prophecy. So they could be referring to the roots of their faith and their ideology, referring back to the prophets and referring to the Christian and Jewish religions. That's another interpretation. It could be referring in an abstract sense. It could also be referring to some sort of abstract idea that there's always a group of powerful men who guide the world, so there's always a Sayle. Like I said, it's open to interpretation. We don't have really a definitive answer. And if a definitive answer is presented, it depends which canon we're talking about. So, what is my opinion as to what Sayle is? How was it founded? My view is that Sayle was founded as a Gnostic cult or a mystery religion. Now, the mystery religions were a group of faiths such as Mithraism, the cult of Sol Invictus, etc., which showed up during the first, second, and third centuries. The mystery religions were a combination of Christianity, Buddhism, Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and a bunch of other stuff kind of merged together. The basic idea of the mystery religions was that there is kind of levels of consciousness or levels of existence. In Neoplatonism, you have the one, which is God or is some kind of like abstract perfection that's at the center of the universe, and you have emanations of the one. And there's infinite number of levels between God and non-being, and that humans can move up the great chain of being through certain practices. Now, when people talk about the mystery religions, they have this idea that the secrets of the mystery religions are some profound revelation into reality. In general, what the mystery religions, the secrets was it was passwords, codes, formulas, rituals. The idea being once you could perform this ritual, you would move up in the great chain of being. Scientology is very similar to this, as you have the operating levels, and there's various rituals, pseudoscience, and technology that you use to kind of ascend the various levels. So, kind of modern Gnosticism, I think, is probably the most similar to something like Scientology. These cults also normally had the idea that there were members of the elect, and that people, only some of humanity, should have access to this knowledge, and that they would guide the world. So my view is Sayle is an outgrowth of a Gnostic cult that somehow survived, as most of them kind of fell out of use in favor of Orthodox or Nicene Christianity. So I think Sayle found the Dead Sea Scrolls, something out about the angels, or something to that effect, and they formed around this with this long-term goal of bringing about their goals to fulfill their what they considered to be the prophecy. Prophecy also plays a role in most biblical faiths, including Gnosticism and that sort of thing. There's always a proposed last judgment. There's always some sort of ascension. It's something common in most forms of religion, whether it's at an individual level like in Hinduism or Buddhism, or it's kind of a collective resurrection of the dead, which is very much what the Third Impact kind of conjures up. So we have that. So modern Sayle, when was modern Sayle founded? And this is kind of an interesting question. When was modern Sayle founded? When did it gain control of the world? When did it really become part of the Illuminati? Once again, there's a number of theories. There's the theory that Sayle had always existed, at least since the first or second century, or maybe even there were roots of it going back to Jewish millenarianism prior to the birth of Christ. But as to the modern form, we aren't really sure. It could be that it existed, but it only gained political power in the 19th or 20th century. That's certainly possible. There's the idea that it's always held political power and always kind of been a cult. That's also a possibility. There's the idea that it wasn't necessarily a formal organization, but it kind of coalesced. I mean, there's always been meetings of the powerful, so maybe it was kind of like the Band of Nine in Game of Thrones, where there was these elites, and they kind of realized that their interests aligns, and they formed together. So did Sayle guide the world prior to Second Impact? Did they guide it since the 19th century? Was it before that? We have no idea. What the series seems to suggest, and what my personal opinion is they'd always been powerful, but they finally assumed direct political control of the Earth. Indirect and direct political control of all of humanity in the aftermath of Second Impact, using their control of the UN and the necessity of global government to deal with the massive crisis wrought by the destruction of half of humanity's population and the majority of the Earth's surface as being a impetus for it. So, what my view of Sayle is so far is that they were a Gnostic cult that has always inducted powerful members, kind of like the Freemasons, who had always been powerful, but really came into its own during the modern era, and eventually took control of the world as kind of how we understand the Illuminati today during the 19th century, moving into the 20th century, and fully after Second Impact. So what is their ideology and what is their goals? Now, this is an interesting question. Once again, we don't know for certain, and none of the goals I'm going to talk about are necessarily mutually exclusive. At kind of the most obvious level, the idea is that the members of Sayle are either some sort of ancient beings or ancient humans who have existed for thousands of years, and they view this has been their long-term plan the whole time. Some people think that Chairman Keel is either Cain or the Wandering Jew. Cain being the brother of Abel, who killed him, and God put a mark on Cain and exiled him from the Garden of Eden. Cain in fiction is often a character perceived as being immortal, cursed to wander the earth indefinitely, but who either wants to return to God and be redeemed, or wants to strike out at God, perhaps by challenging him directly or by destroying his creation of humanity as a way to cause him pain and grief. So Chairman Keel could be Cain. Do I think he's Cain? I don't really think so. The reason being, in the flashback at episode 21, when we see the birth of Nerve, we see a younger Chairman Keel, who's still fairly old, but he lacks the cybernetic implants. My personal view is that Sayle is was formed in the 20th century as kind of a formal political organization. And that's when, because that was, I think, at the time when Sayle started to see that their plans could come to fruition in the foreseeable future. Before the 20th century, they had no way to bring about their master plan because technology wasn't there. They had no way to reach Antarctica and dig up the angels, etc. But when it seemed certain that they'd be able to accomplish their plans within their lifetimes, I think that the members of Sayle, as they grew old and developed diseases, increasingly began to augment their bodies with cybernetic parts. The idea being to delay their deaths just long enough to see instrumentality and achieve their salvation. So we can see them as immortal. We can see them as being the latest generation in a long stream, or we can see them as beings or humans who have, through unnatural means, extended their lives greatly beyond the normal human lifespan. And this leads us into what their ideology is. Now, there's a number of proposed things we can see in Evangelion as to what Sayle's ideology is. On one level, we can see them as kind of a transhumanist group who believes that humanity is the most important thing in the universe, and they wish to elevate humanity to a level equal with God. I don't think this is the case, but that is a possibility, that through instrumentality, and this is, if Chairman Keel is Cain, this would make sense, they want to spit in God's eye or become a rival to God through the instrumentality project. Or they view the idea that humanity has outgrown their creation, or if you want to take a more pro-religious idea, that they can become a companion to God, and they can fulfill the potential that God has given them. There's also the idea that the whole exercise is purely selfish, and that by initiating instrumentality, they'll forgo their inevitable deaths. And by forgoing their inevitable deaths, through becoming part of the Godhead, more or less. Because once they merge into instrumentality, all their physical frailties and illnesses will fade away, and they'll be able to live forever. Whether this is because they don't believe in an afterlife, or they're just simply afraid of death like everybody is, we aren't really sure. There's the idea that they're genuinely religious, and they believe that they're fulfilling God's will, which I think is probably the most likely case. It's probably a combination. It's probably a desire to elevate humanity combined with a desire to maintain control of the world, combined with self-interest, combined with genuine religious ideology. Once again, to go back to my theory that there's some sort of surviving Gnostic cult, they have their secret scriptures which no one's allowed to see, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's very clear throughout the series that they're following the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they regard it as a true prophecy. And beyond being a prophecy, it's the blueprint for everything they do. The idea that they're a religious organization is further supported by the idea that once we come to the final messenger, Quaru, it's revealed that they've been preparing him for years, and that they entrust him with their wish being that he'll fulfill the destiny of the angels and purge humanity from its sin. I believe in some of the extended material, Sayle refers to the removal of original sin as one of their major goals. And once again, could this be that they seek to punish humanity for rebelling against God, that they wish to remove original sin? It could be that, and this is probably my view, that they view by merging all of humanity together into one group consciousness, that they will become one with God. And as I said, that's kind of the idea of Gnosticism, is that the self will eventually dissolve and become part of the Godhead. That in Gnosticism, there's an idea that the body is evil, that this world is evil, that it's created by the demiurge, and we're trapped in the material realm by the demiurge and kind of by this demon. And you have this deep hatred of matter and hatred of physical existence, to the point that some Gnostic sects like the Cathars rejected the idea of childbirth because it was trapping more souls in this world. And the idea was, once the soul was liberated, it would ascend to higher and higher ranks of being and eventually merge with the One. So I think that's, to my mind, the most likely motivation, is they view the Dead Sea Scrolls as being given to them as a form of secret knowledge, and their goal is to shepherd humanity towards a return to the Godhead by destroying people's mortal bodies and allowing them to exist eternally as spiritual beings combined within the One, which would be the human instrumentality. Now, there's other theories to this. Another theory is that it could be like in Alpha Centauri. In Alpha Centauri, one of the victories is transcendence, in which all of humanity uploads its consciousness into the planet to make it into a sentient planet. However, the planet's dominant personality is only made up of the elite and the inner circle of those in the government and who worked on the project. So some people might suggest that all of humanity will be merged into a god, but Sayle themselves will make up the consciousness of the god, and they'll possess all of their power. I think in one of the extended source materials, their plan was to upload their consciousnesses into Unit 1 or into a single Eva, and funnel all of humanity's collective will into that Eva to become a true god under their control. They talk about using Evas, their personal ark, so perhaps the purpose of the mass production models was to consume all of them so they would be able to live forever in an eternal being, because an Eva, once it's gained the fruit of life, can basically live forever, even if the earth is destroyed and even if there's no sun. So those are all kind of possible ideologies or motivations for Sayle. Now, as to what their ultimate plan was and how they sought to obtain this, we aren't really sure. Initially, it seemed that they believed that the angels were were truly messengers from God or the One, who were sent there to lead humanity towards liberation from the bonds of flesh, from the bonds of the earth. As to why, despite viewing them as salvation, and they clearly do because they entrust Quaru with their wish, and they entrust him to trigger third impact, as to why they fight the angels, I'm not clear. They could view it as a challenge that God has sent them to prove themselves worthy. They could just simply view it as part of the ritual, that the Dead Sea Scrolls describe ascendance as a ritual, and that by completing this ritual, they will bring about the salvation of humanity. And whether or not the ritual makes ideological sense doesn't matter, because all that matters is the hidden knowledge contained within the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's another possibility. once again, there's a lot of different interpretations as to what Sayle's ultimate agenda is. There's also the idea that it changes over time, and it reacts to circumstances. Initially, they supported Quaru, but then they realized that wasn't the answer, and then they switched over to the mass production models, and that didn't succeed either, so then they went on to just accept what Shinji did, as it achieved their ultimate aim of humanity being joined as one. So these are all possible. Referring to my view that they're a Gnostic cult, I think further support of this comes from the fact that the mass production models form the tree of life, which is at the root of Kabbalistic philosophy. Kabbalistic philosophy being kind of a Jewish form of mystery religion. The idea that there's these places on the tree of life that you can climb up until eventually you reach Keter, or the crown, which is beyond the understanding of us mortals. So what can be said of Sayle as a whole? Who are they? What do they want? None of it's exactly clear. They could just be a group of self-interested men. They could be, as I believe, an ancient religious cult based on kind of an updated version of mystery religion. Or it could be something else entirely. We'll never really know. Even if Anno explains it, Anno has proven himself to contradict himself and to be kind of crazy in general. So that all being said, I hope you enjoyed the idea of... I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys later. More Sci-Fi Pol Sci to come.